this conversation around digital currency has been about digital currency as store of value. But I think where the real kind of revolution will be coming from, it will not be with these digital currencies as a store of value precisely because of reasons that you gave, but more on the application of the technology, which, as Kelvin very well pointed out, that the open ledger on the blockchain, once we start applying it to settlement systems, clearing systems, this is, I think, where we will start seeing a lot of disruption. And actually, not for the bad, also for the better, precisely because it can also increase not only efficiency, but also transparency of interactions and transactions in financial markets.
Any response to that? In Japan, is this the life you mentioned, the wallet expanding? Is that disrupting, or is it kind of preserving the status quo?
It's expanding with a good harmony.
Oh, okay.
It
doesn't strike me as a disruptive force.
Again, the currency is a very big business for the government. We have to remember. So as you said, as long as it's niche, fine. But once it becomes too big, the government will step in. So I think we have to. I mean, I'm not in the government, okay? I'm in the business. I love Bitcoin. I love digital cash. We have to be careful. We should keep this thing as not too big, just convenient, and then enjoy the transparency and traceability or convenience or whatever.
But I think with any new and powerful technology, there may be a tendency to think of how do we mitigate the risk by keeping it small or keeping it niche. We might have said the same thing about the internet, and yet these powerful new technologies, they have a way of getting beyond our control.
I agree with that.
Yeah, you're right.
One thing that I'd like to come to, one point you mentioned in your question is about the point of transparency of the payment systems or the clearing, settlements and all that. As far as I'm concerned, what I believe is that there is nothing more transparent than that, actually. If you look at all the major payment systems in the world, when it comes to the Fed, FedWire, you go to the ECB, the Eurosystems, you go to the BOG payment system, all of those actually very much transparent. And actually, you're really capable to trace any sort of payments that you have in the country. Banks, national banks are publishing actually, amounts of payments, a number of payments, amounts of payments, and all that every other week. I mean, they do that. I have some questions about the transparency of the Bitcoin system those days. I mean, I don't believe that they are that much transparent. So I think we need to be careful about what we're talking about, because what happened recently with Bitcoin, for me, is far from being transparent. Far from being transparent.
And also, we should remember that there are always some people who don't like transparency. This will continue forever, right?
One thing that we haven't touched on much is the role of reform. And when you look at Alibaba, Jack Ma said he'd like to stir things up in the financial sector. And one has to think that part of what is happening here in China is that the government is perhaps using Alibaba and other companies to reform the banks. So we've talked a lot about risk, but can governments kind of strategically use these players to force change?
It's a very political question, I suppose, if you want me to project intention of the government in this industry. I would say, from my previous experience in online lending and peer-to-peer finance, the regulators and governance in China is actually very strategic, very sophisticated, very technically astute. And while I wouldn't say that this would be a weapon or a tool to encourage reform, I think they certainly would see and want to balance the opportunity of letting new entrants force a little bit of change. And so I'm sure they're seeing the costs and benefits and the trade-offs of it, if not saying, hey, Jack, why don't you come mix things up a little bit?
Partha, do you think that will happen in India? Will we see a kind of managed mix of new and old as we bank those 600 million people?
Yeah. If IT is one example of how things have transformed in India, when you jumped in and started using that as a mean of livelihood, we've not seen the big workstations ever. Yeah. And still, you adapted it, the entire ecosystem adapted it, new laws came in. I think technology as a way of getting and persuading many people because of the benefit it gives to the entire ecosystem. And government need not be persuaded by applications, but we can be persuaded by benefits that it brings in. And I think we all cannot deny the benefits of these things. So eventually, yes, it will come. But just remember one thing in the financial world which doesn't apply to anything else, that you are trading with millions of people's money. And that is where it is not just about being in the sector. If another US kind of crisis comes in the financial sector, and that comes because this kind of non-regulated industry, just look at the kind of harm it could do. And that's why the security piece is so important for this to become mainframe. Yeah, and we need to look at that not as a means of stopping somebody, but as a checks and balances, which is more appropriate in financial industry than in any other industry. Which is that. Because you are playing with retail people's money. That's at the end of the day, that's the game. And therefore, it's actually how much fast the government can bring security and regulation to manage this. So in a sense, government will have to step in eventually, but then this is not even regulated. So that's the trade-off one has to say.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to just go around the circle and see what your predictions might be for how this will end up in the next 3 to 5 years.
More inclusion is a word that I can, not just of more people participating, but also technology participating in the game. That's how I see it going. With the government slowly using security as a mean of comforting themselves, but operating in niches. This is how I see the world going in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Things will change, definitely. But when you think about the vested interest around this currency or settlement, I think it has to move slow. It will move slowly compared to other innovations, I think.
So not as fast as one might think. Alan.
Well, I'm pretty sure that, well, of course, I mean, technology will keep evolving faster than ever, and will keep accelerating again and again. I think the financial industry will have to keep adapting to that. But I'm with you as well. I mean, whilst you're going to have many more people, the unbanked, getting banked and all that, there will be a lot more interest in national interest, getting involved into the definition of the future of that industry.
With that, please join me in thanking the panelists for a fascinating discussion. Thank you.